there's an underreporting of deaths, of both mortality and morbidity in relation to heat waves. And the more we're looking into it, the more we're realizing that it really is the most dangerous of all extreme weather phenomena that are linked to global warming.
Hello and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Juliet Eilprin, Deputy Editor for Climate and Environment here at the Washington Post. As part of our This is Climate series, today we're going to discuss the impact of a warming planet and the global solutions that can help make a global difference. Later, we'll hear from the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, Kate Gallego. But first, I'm joined by the Chief Heat Officer in Santiago, Chile, Cristina Huidobro, and the Global Chief Heat Officer for UN Habitat, Eleni Myrivili. Eleni is also the Interim Chief Heat Officer in Athens, Greece. Cristina, Eleni, welcome to Washington Post Live.
Thank you very much.
Great to see both of you. Cristina, let's start with you. The concept of a chief heat officer is relatively new. Could you explain to our audience what your role is and what you've accomplished since taking on this post?
Okay, yes, it's new for all of us, not only in Santiago, Chile. And I think the main, we're aimed to bring awareness to the public, but also to the decision makers, the authorities, in order to get to know how important extreme heat is as a hazard, right? It's because nobody thinks that heat might really kill people, and the extreme heat is a hazard that we need to tackle, we need to address in order to continue to live the lives we are used to live, right? Most people think that climate change won't affect them, like it's a problem that is not near them. And everyone that is living in a city like Santiago with 8 million people is exposed to extreme heat and its effects. So first of all, awareness, and second, how we can adapt our city to this new normal, right? This extreme heat exposure. So trying to bring more green within the city. We're trying to think in a range of projects that we can help bring a little the cooler get in our cities.
Great. And Eleni, in Athens, you broke heat waves into 4 different categories. Could you explain what those categories are and what you learned from classifying them in different ways according to what kind of threat they pose to human health?
Well, this is something that we piloted last summer for the first time in Athens and in Seville, which is also an extremely hot city in Europe. What we did is, together with our Rock Resilience Center Scientific Committee, we we took the data from 2 decades of temperatures in Athens, but also of mortality. So we tried to correlate and figure out what kind of temperatures raise the levels of mortality, the percentage of mortality, specifically for the city of Athens, or for the city of Seville for that matter. And then we created an algorithm which is again specific for the city and which can then be used to figure out the next heat wave that's going to hit the city, how dangerous it's going to be. So depending on the level of danger that each heat wave poses to the population, we have a category 0, basically, which is that it's a hot day, but it's not particularly dangerous for people. Only very vulnerable groups should take care and take cover. Category 1, which means that we have to start really taking care of the most vulnerable communities, and it goes up to 2, and then finally to 3. And category 3 is a very high danger, levels of really high danger to the health and the mortality of our people, and we have to take extreme measures to make sure that we can protect them. So it's really great to have these types of categories because it's important for policymakers and decision makers to be able to respond to the impact of heat waves. So instead of just saying, oh, this is a very hot day, or we have 38 degrees or 37 degrees or 13, I guess this is Fahrenheit is like around 100 or more or so, and it's a dangerous day. It's really important to kind of start to understand that we're talking about levels of percentage of danger for the health of our population, and to put measures in effect that can protect especially the most vulnerable.
Got it. And Cristina, Santiago is home to roughly 40% of Chile's residents, right? With more roughly 8 million people living there. Could you talk a little about what are the threats that a city with so many people living in it faces when it comes to extreme heat?
Yes, of course. Well, is a city as big as Santiago, a metropolitan area, combines a lot of problems. Not only a lot of segregation that is very common in Latin America, but also areas of the city where you don't have many green, you don't have public spaces or parks, things. So most vulnerable people live in those areas. So if you combine the index of the access of green spaces and the poverty or vulnerability indexes, they usually are converting the same area, and most of those are urban heat islands neighborhoods with So those type of neighborhoods have people with have energy poverty. With some of them, their houses are not well constructed, not well isolated. So they need, and there's a lot of people living in the same house. So you have a really crowded population. So those are actually things we need to take a look into it, because those people are more exposed to the effects of heat, right? When Eleni talks about the vulnerable population, we always think in the infants, the young people, the elderly people, the women that are pregnant, also migrants. We have a huge wave of migration in Santiago, and most of them live in those areas, and they don't have enough resources to have, for example, isolate the houses, have access to some of them are in neighborhoods are not even settled. So some of them don't even have access to water. So these are a combination of problems, so are really wicked, really complex. But the good news, okay, is that nobody has to die from extreme heat. So as Lenio said, we also have a red code in Santiago. So we have categorized the temperatures that are dangerous to people, and the authorities need to take actions toward to protect these people. So in schools, in some in the hospitals, so they can address these vulnerable people and try to keep them safe. Mostly giving them like hydrating them. You need to rest and go to a shade or don't expose yourself to the heat. So it's not that we need to do something really complicated to keep people safe. And this, I think that message is the one that we're trying to put out during our campaign in our summer.
And just to follow up briefly on that, so when you're talking about these kind of urban heat islands, right, becoming literal hotspots, that basically when you don't have enough greenery and you have more paved surfaces, in some ways that intensifies the heat that people living in these areas that have already energy poverty are exposed to. You obviously outlined some of the kind of immediate steps you can take when a heat wave is going on. Are there broader changes underway in Santiago? Is there, concerted effort to do tree planting, to do other changes to some of these areas so that they will be more resilient in the long term?
Yeah, we just started a couple of months ago our first regional urban tree planting program. The idea is to bring more greenery, especially to these areas. We are starting with a pilot program for about $2 million. But Governor Claudio Rego, he already is committed to continue to this first program in order to bring at least 200,000 more trees to the region in the near future. The idea is to put some pocket forest, like this is small, I don't know, you know, the technique Miyawaki, the Japanese technique, to bring this small like forest in within the city, also these trees along the streets, and of course in parks and recreational areas. The idea is to put as much as green as we can in order to tackle the heat in the and improve the quality of life of most of these areas.
Wonderful. Eleni, you've talked about how the number of heat-related deaths are underreported. And clearly this is an area where, you know, there's an absence of information, there's a lack of understanding. Could you explain both how deadly this threat is and what efforts governments are taking to have a more accurate assessment of how many people, whether it's in Athens or elsewhere, are dying from extreme heat?
So we know that today there is about 350 cities in the world that where people are facing temperatures that are above 35 degrees Celsius, which is temperatures that are starting to be really dangerous for the human body. And we know that in the next few decades, it's going to rise from 350 to close to 1,000 cities. And by the end of this century, we're talking about almost half the population of the planet having to face temperatures that our bodies are not made for, and our cities are not made for. What happens to our bodies is that when the temperature rises, the body starts losing its capacity to regulate its internal temperature, its internal temperature.
Yeah.
So it starts, you start having a heat stroke, and different organs start to have a hard time coping with the temperatures. And so in cities like Cristina said, like in Santiago or in Athens or other cities that are people are used to being hot in the summer, they don't really realize that we're talking about a different type of heat, that we're talking about temperatures that are higher, longer, and more frequent in the summers, that our summers are becoming significantly hotter and our bodies are not used to these temperatures. And we are seeing issues that beyond kind of a lot of different health problems. We also see mental health problems rising as heat rises. We're seeing issues of violence in communities rising, problems with education, kids not being able to absorb information very well. We have more and more studies where we realize that we've been talking about global warming, but we really haven't studied the effects of what that means to humans, and especially to urban populations. So we have data about temperatures and about climate change and the effects of climate change, and how we have data from satellites that tells us a lot about as Cristina pointed to, like, where are the hotspots in cities, so we know where to target our initiatives. Mm-hmm. However, we're still lacking a lot of data, for example, around, as you said, health. It's difficult to get data around health, mortality and morbidity, especially in countries that are in parts of the global south. It's really difficult to get data that so that we know and we start figuring out what really the effects are. It's hard to get data about what the impact of heat is on our economies. We're just now starting to see reports on, for example, the global GDP and what is the expectation of, because of lower productivity, because with heat we can't work so well, and we have also more work-related injuries, but also just a loss of productivity. Just from that, we know that we're going to have a significant problem with people being able to
work and things like that,
to,
right?
to work and to survive on jobs, especially with manual jobs. People lose their daily wages because they can't work, and when they lose their daily wages, this is like this terrible, detrimental issue for families that are living day to day, and so these are issues that we have to really look at, and the data for these types of things can make politicians and can make governments take the right type of policies, but not just governments, also foundations, humanitarian aid, etc., like to learn how to target the people that are most affected by these things.
Right. And we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask two questions, one to each of you from our audience. So, Eleni, Sandra Bear from Washington, D.C. asks, what are the top three steps every community should take to address extreme heat and the lack of safe drinking water? Can you name a few steps, 2 or 3 steps that every community can take?
The lack of safe drinking water is another big issue. I mean, water is a really, really significant aspect for heat. And the more we realize about, as Cristina said, as you mentioned before, trees and nature is the best solution that we have right now. We have other solutions too, but trees and nature are the best solution that we have for lowering temperatures in cities. And we have to radically bring them into the urban fabric, to really radically bring green and nature in their urban fabric. Water as well. We have to figure out, and this is the second thing. So one is nature. The second thing is water, which is we have to figure out backup water that's not drinkable water to really support our green nature. So figure out more sustainable use of resources and, for example, sewer mining for supporting our nature in cities. And finally, the last thing, I'll go back to what Cristina said, awareness raising. We really have to get the word out with early warning systems and with raising constantly the knowledge around the world about how dangerous heat is for the human body and for our communities and society.
Wonderful. And Cristina, very quickly, I want to squeeze in like 60 seconds, the last question. Theron Russell of Maryland asks, what should government and nonprofits be doing now to protect low-income residents from present and future heat waves? You've already outlined some of the things you're doing in Santiago. Is there one other thing that nonprofits or governments should be doing, Cristina, that comes to mind?
I will say something that might not be very popular with people. I agree with Eleni. We should bring more greenery, more trees within the neighborhood, and try not to do the first thing that we always say: put air conditioner in every home, or or make these cooling centers. Most people that work with me say, we should do like the US or Europe, cooling centers, bring AC in every houses. And AC is part of the problem. It's not the solution. So I get that might be like a quick answer, but it's going to increase the problem. We are talking about heat here. We don't want more heat outside the homes or in the neighborhoods. So I would say, I know we need to start planting trees today in order to see the benefits in 20, 30 years, but that's why it's so urgent. We need to do it now and try to address this thing in the long term, and not try to bring these popular or easy solutions that is going to increase the problem in the long run. So I would say that.
Yes, thank you, Cristina, because some of our audience might not know that air conditioning actually emits very potent greenhouse gases that help warm the planet. So thank you. We'll continue to follow this critical story. And Cristina, Eleni, thank you for joining us here on Washington Post Live. We really
Thank you.
appreciate your knowledge, and thanks to all of you for joining. Please stay with us for the next segment of this conversation.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Koch. Solving the challenge of a warming world isn't just a government responsibility. Corporations are increasingly stepping up and applying their scientific know-how. Here to talk about that issue and some of the innovations they've come up with to help help mitigate the impacts of climate change is 3M Marketing Operations Manager Carrie Nizgaki. Hi, Carrie. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Kathleen. Happy to be here.
Carrie, 3M's motto is science applied to life. How are you innovating to help create science-based solutions to climate change?
Sure. We're fortunate that at 3M, sustainability really is at the core of our company. As we're developing products and solutions, we need to show a sustainability value commitment, which is really our company requirement that every new product needs to demonstrate how it is impacting the greater good. In our roofing business, we're also interested in how we address climate issues in communities, rising temperatures, but also meeting the demand of consumers who are looking for more eco-friendly materials in their construction material choices.
I'll bet that in the process of this research, 3M has formed some interesting partnerships. So who have you been working with, and where are you testing out your ideas?
Sure, we wanted to investigate a little bit further into what other communities may be experiencing extreme heat events, urban heat island challenges, and we worked with applied climatologists. What they do is model weather pattern and climate patterns over different cities and can model out what the impact may be. And so what we learned was if the urban heat island can be taken down just 1 or 2 degrees, it can save lives during an extreme heat event. In cities like Chicago and Boston, cities that we wouldn't typically think of being prone to extreme heat events, but their infrastructure may not be as resilient to those high temperatures. And we're also working with our customers in collaborating on unique solutions, as well as continuing to research with consumers. And one of my favorite sayings when working with the R&D team, when we're looking at a problem we're trying to solve or evaluating an opportunity, sometimes I'll hear that hasn't been invented yet. And yet really is that jumping off point and where the innovation really begins.
Carrie, as urban populations grow and natural land areas shrink, urban heat islands are taking an increasing toll on human health. How has 3M tackled that problem? Specifically, I understand you've created a cool roof technology.
Yes, when cool roofing was invented, cool roofing granules were invented, they were really designed to help homeowners save on energy costs in climates with year-round cooling. But they became more widely adopted in California specifically to help mitigate the urban heat island effects. So the city of Los Angeles established a building code that required all residential homes, construction of all residential homes include a cool roof. And that was really to help reduce a human health impact of the urban heat islands.
That sounds really smart. Have other cities followed suit?
And not to the extent of Los Angeles, but another concept and product that's out there that's really capturing the imagination of people and communities and is around smog reducing technology. And so we've brought to market a smog reducing roofing granule that integrates into a shingle surface, which asphalt shingles are the most widely used roofing material on homes across the country. And so we're able to transform that into a smog fighting surface. It reacts with the sun and transforms smog gases into a plant usable form of nitrogen, similar to planting 2 to 3 trees.
That is fascinating. Well, rising temperatures are a global problem that the public and private sector must really solve together. What do you wish that more government officials knew about your work at 3M and the potential impact you can have in this area?
Sure. A range of cooling solutions are already available at 3M, and we're eager to partner on products and technologies that can really help address the many issues that communities are facing due to extreme heat. We've seen success with infrastructure policies like the City of LA, and we're encouraged by the continuing conversations around how we can make our communities more resilient against our changing climate.
Carrie Nizgaki, 3M Marketing Operations Manager. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Kathleen. Great to see you.
And now I'll toss it back to the Washington Post.
Imagine if that air conditioner never came on, right? You're just in the heat all the time.
We're going to lose people every year because the heat just, it comes upon you so quickly that you don't even know what's happening, and then it's too late.
Trying to develop a model and a toolkit for how cities can respond to heat. We want to make sure we're doing what we can to prepare, to communicate about it, and to mitigate these very serious impacts.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Juliet Eilprin, Deputy Editor for Climate and Environment here at the Washington Post. I'm now joined by Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego to discuss how local leaders are finding ways to address extreme heat here in the United States. Mayor Gallego, welcome to Washington Post Live.
So good to be with you, Juliet.
Thanks so much. So Phoenix is the hottest city in America. I know they talk about a dry heat. I've been there and enjoyed it myself. But since the daily high reaches 100 degrees on a near daily basis between May and September, how do you cope with that?
It's part of the reason that we're really making it a priority here to try to find solutions. The country is divided about many political issues, but I can tell you, summer in Phoenix, we're all united in wanting to make sure we don't get any hotter and that we try to create as comfortable of an environment as possible. We are proud to be the first city in the country to have created a permanent office within our municipal government related to heat. We call ours the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation. So similar, but not exactly the same as the two offices that you just highlighted. We wanted to make sure there's a place to go for great ideas related to addressing heat. There's a lot of innovation happening, and people, including our city employees and residents, have ideas about how we might do better. So now we have a one-stop shop for all of those ideas. It has been a great resource for our businesses, our city employees, and just for innovative companies who have solutions. Since we're coming out of a segment with 3M, I will highlight some of the ways we've used technology on heat. We believe, the country's largest cool pavement program, where we do a lighter colored coating on our city streets. Arizona State University is our partner on this program and has found 10 to 12 degrees cooling as a result of that coating. All mayors hate potholes, so we're also pleased to share that it seems to result in fewer potholes because the pavement doesn't have to expand and contract as much, so it lasts longer. We're also just looking at our building code and other areas if there's technology solutions where we can do better. Great journalism yesterday in the Washington Post about shipping containers. So we were the Super Bowl host committee in Central Arizona this week, and Washington Post editorial team wrote about a Super Bowl story you might have missed, which was how we're investing in innovative technology, including shipping containers, R26 insulation, solar panels on top. But we had to change some of our city processes to allow the solar panels to go out into the right of way. It's beloved when you create more shade over the sidewalks. And it was a pretty simple fix. But again, we just needed to make sure we had government set up for the innovation that's happening in our community.
Got it. And obviously, so you just outlined some of the different ways you're becoming a heat-ready city in terms of technology. Are there any technological advances, but other techniques that you've adopted that are really helping address this challenge and make sure that you're avoiding unnecessary deaths or just disruption to people's lives because of the rising temperatures?
A trend with today's conversation is that investment in tree canopy. We were the first city in the US to take American Forest's Tree Equity Pledge. We said that as we plant trees in our city, we would do it with an eye towards equity. Like many communities, our wealthier areas tend to have more tree cover than the areas that have not had as much investment. The city said on the tree investment, as well as many others, we hope to change that, and we're going to measure ourselves. So we are taking both local dollars and federal dollars and putting trees in. We're creating 100 cool corridors where we have both cool pavement and the tree cover. It's interesting what cities say about themselves when they're on the national stage and international stage. So with Super Bowl in our community, we had 6,000 credentialed media visiting. The media center is walking distance from where I am right now. And we took the local bus shelters and talked about some of the things we're doing in innovative solutions, including the cool corridors. I think that's a real point of pride for me. We're saying Phoenix is paying attention to heat and we care about solutions. That is what we want to tell the world when the world is visiting us. In addition to cool corridors, we have a great program, our residential tree equity accelerator. It was actually in part inspired by Freetown in Sierra Leone, which has a program where they hire local residents to care for their trees. We are training local residents so that they'll understand the basic principles of tree care, can maybe create a small business if that's of an interest, and putting money into the communities where we're planting trees, which we hope will create good jobs in addition to political support. Plus, you get the lower air conditioning bills or more comfortable environment as those trees grow and create cooler communities.
And where are you struggling to make headway? What are some of the biggest obstacles that you're facing right now as you're trying to make these changes?
So I guess it's probably a good problem to have, but we've made so much investments in these areas, there isn't always capacity. So we got ahead of workforce in some of these green jobs. And that's part of the reason we are trying to create the accelerator and do training for local residents so that we have the workforce for the green jobs. But again, that's a good problem to have. We also need to, as we rapidly expand our investment in tree canopy, make sure that we have the trees to be planting. We are pursuing some of the federal dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act for urban forestry, and we're working hard to build the capacity in our community to achieve those goals. We are the 5th largest city in the country, so we know it may be a little bit easier for us than some other communities, but it's a pretty rapid expansion in interest in urban forestry. And so it's a workforce challenge and a supply chain challenge. Who would have thought we could get supply chain into any conversation these days? But
there you go. And that leads into the question of, in terms of your tree canopy, in 2010, Phoenix pledged, right, to grow a tree canopy to shade 25% of its land by the end of the decade. Where are you along the trajectory of meeting that goal?
We are really proud of how much we ramped up, and we are continuing to work. We also had some real challenges with some rough summer storms, and we planted in right-of-ways where the root box wasn't big enough always to maintain the trees, so we lost some of the new trees we planted. We have seen, I think, a huge acceleration with federal partnership. So first, we were one of the communities that took American Rescue Plan dollars and put it into heat and shade trees. And then maybe not a story that's been told a lot, but the Inflation Reduction Act is a generational investment in American forest and tree equity, including urban forests. And so we are still competing for those dollars, but we think that could be the most important partnership we have in achieving our goals. I've also been really impressed with the private sector stepping up. Cisco has been a partner with us in terms of the data tools. There's a sustainability-focused bank called Aspiration, and their customers plant trees with their investments and financial accounts. They have partnered with us as well. And just fun community-driven stories. So we have a robust Sikh community here. They just celebrated the 550th anniversary of the birth of their guru, and they did it by planting 550 trees in a low-income neighborhood in Phoenix. So what a wonderful gift to the entire community to celebrate that anniversary. We're hoping it'll be the new trend. So if you know anyone who's retiring, maybe a tree planting gift would be the way to go.
And understood. All right. So that's it. I want to move on to another question, but just to ask briefly, do you know what percentage of the canopy is covered at this point? Do you have a rough estimate of where you are? And
I don't.
Not right now. All right. So urban areas, as we've discussed, tend to concentrate heat. And clearly you've talked about some of the things to do, including cool pavement, other ways to address this. Are there anything individual residents can do to help curb the heat, aside from, as you mentioned, maybe plant a tree in honor of someone else or themselves? Are there specific individual actions that you see that are making a difference in these urban areas?
So the choices you make with the built environment are very important. What type of building materials you use makes an impact. Transportation choices are enormously important. We are trying to create the Cool Corridors program in areas where people will be most likely to be walking and biking. So we hope if we do our part that our residents will feel more comfortable leaving the car behind and taking a walk or bike to work. And again, that can help both with greenhouse gas emissions as well as a source of heat.
Okay. And when we talk about, for example, in Phoenix, I think roughly 300 people a year die from extreme heat. Who has been, when you look beyond those statistics, who's been most at risk? Obviously, they're different vulnerable populations, but when you've looked at who in your community is actually suffering the greatest toll, who are those folks? Are we looking at the elderly? Is it the homeless? How has that manifested itself in Phoenix?
So people with medical challenges where you can't control your body temperature are obviously hugely at risk. People experiencing homelessness. We do have a significant concentration of mobile homes, and those tend to have challenges, particularly those who were built before some building code changes that happened in the 1990s. Those homes do not tend to have great insulation and can be quite hot in the summer. We are challenging our technology partners who have come up with great solutions for fire alarms and other notification technologies. Can you help us with technology solutions so that we know when a vulnerable individual is in a home that is getting too hot? And I'm hopeful we'll have some breakthroughs to announce in that area soon, but that's an area where I hope the private sector will step up because it seems like a really solvable challenge around what is the safe indoor temperature.
Got it. And
we also have a real challenge with narcotics. And so fentanyl in particular, combined with heat, is a real challenge.
And some people in Phoenix have been dying in part because of a lack of access to air conditioning and therefore having their bodies overheat. What is the role that the government can play in that, especially given, as we were just discussing in our last segment, that of course air conditioning actually helps fuel global warming, but at the same time it is a critical way that, particularly in the United States and in many countries, people cope with extreme heat?
We have made the decision that cooling centers make sense for our community. We, as much as possible, are trying to power our local energy supply with renewable energy. We have more than 300 degrees of sun and are investing big in solar energy, which obviously if an air conditioning is powered by solar, it's a little bit greener than if it's powered by fossil fuels. So we have a network throughout our community with city-sponsored cooling centers, and then we partner with philanthropy and faith organizations as well. And we try to make sure people know where you can get a cool drink of water, a place to cool down. And that, I believe, has saved a lot of lives in our community. So it's a policy decision that makes sense for me.
Got it. I don't know how many mayors in major cities studied environmental science in college, but obviously you're one of them. And I was wondering if you could talk a little about why that's the case, what drew you to it, and how does it inform the decisions that you're making now that you're in elected office?
I grew up with asthma, and while you're wheezing by the track, you have a chance to reflect on areas like air quality. I also just got very interested in environmental issues. Being a Southwestern community, it's very important to understand our water supply and incredibly important to the future of our communities. I first got involved with the city working on solar energy and our solar energy program at the city of Phoenix. And I, like many people in Phoenix, were drawn to our community in part because of our amazing outdoor spaces. We have more acres of parks than any other city in the United States, especially our mountain parks are a really special place to me personally. So my academic passions have lined up very well with the public policy needs in our community. And I think that's been a good background. Most big city mayors, at least for a while, were lawyers. And so I have a different background with an MBA and an environmental degree. But for a city like Phoenix and the challenges we face, it's often been a very good background, although no background is perfect.
Got it. Now, you, as you mentioned, have been focused on the challenges in Phoenix for a long time, but not every city has made this a priority. We have a question from the audience. Reggie Teasley from New York asks, how can we motivate our city and county governments to grasp the impacts of global heating? So could you talk a little about that?
And cities have stepped up in a big way. So I've been proud to be part of a network of mayors called Climate Mayors. We have 400 mayors in the United States who have joined that network, which was created after the US pulled out of the Paris Accords. Cities said, okay, the United States is not actively engaged in Paris Accords, but cities want to move forward. And many cities have been incredibly ambitious. We have 138 American cities that committed to net zero by 2050. For a growing city like mine, that's a real commitment. You have to change policy from the built environment to transportation to how you develop your economy. It has worked well for us. And so if climate data isn't convincing your local elected officials, maybe some on economic growth would matter. Phoenix was in the spotlight last December when President Biden joined the CEO of Apple and others at the major announcement for TSMC, the global semiconductor foundry. Apple is their biggest customer, and Apple's made ambitious commitments on sustainability. So when TSMC was making a decision about where to invest, they wanted a community that could help them with their renewable energy goals, and Apple right there with them. That will change our economy forever. It's a $40 billion investment, and it's attracting suppliers, educational partners. We have guys who struggled to find a job, men and women who struggled to find a job, particularly people who had maybe a felony in their record. And now the construction market is so intense in Phoenix that people are getting very high wage jobs. Experienced construction workers are going into semiconductors, and there's a ton of new entry-level apprenticeship positions, which are taking in people who, again, struggled to find employment before. So that's just one example of an economic deal where sustainability was one of many factors, but one that helped us attract high wage jobs. I would hope the climate impacts and the legacy we leave behind for our kids would motivate many people, but I understand everyone has their different path to interest in these issues. So those are my big dollar signs.
Got it. I wanted to ask one question about kind of transparency, whether it's on the part of the government or, say, like a major home builder in the Phoenix area. Josh Partlow is one of the members of the climate team. He's written a number of powerful stories, including ones from, a suburb of Phoenix where, folks basically bought homes and did not realize that they were going to be cut off in terms of their water supply. It's a slightly different, climate risk, but absolutely related to the warming temperatures. Is there more that you feel like either the government can demand or that, the private sector has to step up in giving, the residents in Phoenix and elsewhere a sense of how climate is affecting them and what steps they want to think about making or decisions they need to factor in when they're making major decisions, about where they live and how they work and so forth?
It is a real challenge here in Arizona. We had Janet Napolitano was our governor and pushed for a major climate action plan for the state. After she became Secretary of Homeland Security, there was a major political change and the legislature passed legislation saying we weren't going to work on climate action. We struggled just to get basic data after that bill passed. We've also been preempted at the local government level on energy building disclosures. So unfortunately, data is political. The data clearly shows this is an issue for our community that we need to pay attention, but not everyone has come to the table and even been willing to collect the data as opposed to just responding to it and creating public policies around it. We're having a debate over legislation in Arizona right now, which would do a lot of zoning by right. And I'm concerned that could be very dangerous in areas that don't have as strong as water supply as the city of Phoenix. So we have not solved that problem yet.
Got it. And we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one last question because you did talk a little bit about the long term and people looking ahead. So what's your hope for Phoenix when you look at what life will be like in 2050, for example, given the steps you're taking now and what we're facing in terms of rising temperatures? What's your vision of what it's like in mid-century?
People in Phoenix understand this is a challenge and they've stepped up to the plate. It's my hope that Phoenix will become a center for the most advanced technology in this area, as well as proven solutions like tree planting, that the most innovative minds in heat will say, this is a government and a private sector and a nonprofit sector that all care about these issues. I have a cool idea, pun intentional, and I'm going to go to Phoenix to implement it because we're going to have great partners there. So I believe we have the runway and the political support at the Phoenix local level to be leading edge on solutions. And hopefully there'll be great ideas coming out of Phoenix so that yesterday's Washington Post piece on our housing innovation will be one of many that you'll get to talk about in the future.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. Mayor Kate Gallego, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Juliet. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your important coverage.
Thank you. I'm glad you're a loyal Post reader. And thanks to all of you for joining us. To check out what interviews we have coming up, please head to WashingtonPostLive.com to register and find out more information about all our upcoming programs. I'm Juliet Eilprin. Thanks again for joining us.